Welcome to the South Asia Democratic Forum podcast. I'm your host, Tapas Kanti Baul. On June 30th, 2026, the International Crimes Tribunal Bangladesh delivered a highly controversial verdict against Hasanul Haque Inu, sentencing the prominent politician to 30 years in prison, ordered to be served as 10 years concurrently. While presented under the guise of accountability for the events of the 2024 July uprising, the judgment has ignited intense debate surrounding the rule of law, the manipulation of transitional justice mechanisms, and the shrinking space for political dissent in Bangladesh. Before we dive into our analysis, a brief point of professional disclosure to the listeners and viewers that both myself and today's guest have professionally advised Mr. Inu's family and his broader legal team throughout these proceedings. Joining me today to dissect this verdict and its wider systematic implications is Dr. Rayhan Rashid of the Oxford Matrix. Together, we will examine what we observe to be a deeply biased judicial process at the International Crimes Tribunal of Bangladesh, one that appears to structurally target individuals not for verifiable criminal conduct, but for their lifelong commitment to the secular principles of the 1971 Liberation War, their status as freedom fighters, and their vocal opposition to the political ideologies of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party and Bangladesh Jamaat-e-Islami. Dr. Rashid, welcome to the program. Let's begin with the structural anatomy of this judgment. So I hope you have had the opportunity to go through the media reports on the judgment that was passed by the International Crimes Tribunal yesterday, right?
Thank you, Taposh, for having me. Yes, the judgment was delivered yesterday, and we have all followed the media reports. Just a note of caution: we still haven't read the full judgment, so we are still
Right.
awaiting that. So we'll continue our discussion based on the media report.
Right. So International Crimes Tribunal, which I was a part of as well, it was established under the International Crimes Tribunal Act 1973, just after the independence of Bangladesh by the Parliament of Bangladesh, to try those who committed international crimes in 1971. At first, the Pakistan Army was the main subject matter of this act, and then in 2009, it was amended by Bangladesh Awami League when they were in power, so that the local perpetrators can also be accommodated,
The scope was
isn't it?
expanded. Yes, it was expanded. Yes.
Yeah, right. So then in this tribunal, near about 50 judgments concerning the local perpetrators of 1971 was handed by the International Crimes Tribunal before 5th of August 2024. And all of those judgment was concerning those perpetrators who committed crimes against humanity and genocide in 1971.
Yes.
So why now do you think that the present government or the earlier one under Dr. Yunus, the illegal government, unconstitutional government, that way I see it, why did they choose International Crimes Tribunal to try the events of July and August? What do you think?
It's a good question, Taposh. As you mentioned, you have been a prosecutor of the International Crimes Tribunal and served for more than a decade, right? And the tribunal had a very stellar record in trying the perpetrators of 1971, and it has served, as you mentioned, that more than 50 judgments have been delivered. But what we have seen since the Yunus government, the interim government, took over, we have seen a very, very, very direct capture of the justice system. I do not have, for lack of better words, it was a capture.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, the tribunal can prosecute and investigate offenses of crimes against humanity, genocide, war crimes. Yes, that's true. But what we saw, that the tribunal actually have become, it has become a political tool. It was a political tool of vendetta. It has become a political tool to punish the opposition, eliminate the opposition, and so on. That was the most alarming part. And it saddens us because many of us actually gave our lifeblood to establish this tribunal, to bring it to the position where it was 2 years ago. And it
Right.
pained us greatly. And when we saw that the venue of justice was being abused, used for political purpose, it saddened us. And so that is what happened. Since 2024, after August, we saw that tribunal has been used to eliminate opposition, to punish the opposition, and anyone who didn't support the Yunus regime. And if you look at the list of people who have been tried so far in the International Crimes Tribunal for the last 2 years, you'd see that journalists, prominent intellectuals, even activists who have served, who gave their life, who served all their life to campaign for justice, for genocide, people like Sharia Kabir, they are now accused in the same tribunal. And what what else can you say? It is just a farce. It is. I do not have any other words to describe that.
So the next point is that why Jamaat-e-Islami, Yunus and BNP is targeting people like Hasanul Haque Inu. Like Hasanul Haque Inu is a valiant freedom fighter, an organizer during 1971 War of Liberation, and then he is the president of Jatiyo Samajtantrik Dol. So, which is in short Jashod. Why they are targeting him? He was not an MP, member of parliament in 2024. He was not holding any position of control. Only he was a member of the 14-party alliance or the Grand Alliance of Bangladesh Awami League.
It,
So
it was
why?
a loose coalition of like-minded political parties, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Particularly the political parties who believe in 1971 spirit. So those were the kind of parties who were members of the 14-party alliance. And you rightly mentioned that he was not in command, but if you look at the allegation against him, he was been tried superior command responsibility, as if he was some kind of commanding officer or someone in command, someone in power who have ordered all the atrocities, alleged atrocities. Whereas, since when did he during the whole period, he didn't hold any office, no executive authority, he didn't have any power, he didn't have, as you said, no command to begin with. But even then, he had been accused of abusing his command authority, allegedly for the so-called July events, and that is what I find most baffling. But the question is, why him? Why
Right.
him? Well, if we look at two things, I think are very important. The one thing is during the July quota movement. If we look at his position regarding the quota movement, he was actually not against the movement. He was not against reform of the quota system. His position and his party's position, they are all well recorded. His position, what was his position? They supported the reform of the quota system. His party, Mr. Inu included, he campaigned for dialogue and discussion. So that was his position, that the quota system, definitely he also agrees that it needs to be reformed. And during the July unrest, when it actually became very violent, what was his position then? His public position, even his private positions, as evidence from various telephone records, what was his position? His position was he was calling for restraint, both to the government and both to the protesters. His position was of restraint and how yes, please.
Is introducing the concept of dialogue,
Dialogue,
that
exactly.
that through peaceful mechanism, let us sit together, all the parties together, discuss what is on the table, address the elephant in the room, and then take what is the best decision. He was mentioning
Exactly.
repeatedly that the government in 2018 already took this policy to scrap all sorts of quota, all sorts of reservations, only reservation in a very few sectors. Then why we depend on this kind of violence?
So
Let us
his
talk.
so his
And then,
position was one for peace, one for restraint, one particularly against any kind of political violence. Even then, that is the ridiculous bit, that he has been now charged as someone who abated, incited violence, and so on. And that is the
right.
most ridiculous bit. But why else he has been targeted? Well, your guess is as good as mine, because all his life he has advocated for justice for genocide, justice for the victims of 1971 genocide. He was a very much staunch pro 71 leader, thought leader, and that I think put him in the target, that draw a target on him by the Jamaat Islami, which itself was the main perpetrator party during the 1971, collaborating with the Pakistani war criminals. And when the Yunus government took over, it is no secret that it was directly supported and, what I would say, bolstered by Jamaat Islami. So behind the interim regime, the main power players were the Jamaat. And when the tribunal was captured, particularly by many Jamaati actors and operators, they saw it as an opportunity of revenge. Like let's use this tribunal to teach a lesson to people who were pro 71, who were against, who always advocated for justice, against justice for genocide, and particularly who actually whose politics was against Jamaat. So this tribunal became a tool to get political revenge. So that is why Mr. Inu, Hasanul Haque Inu, was basically tried in the first place. And if you look at the verdict, in one of the charges, so-called charges, for which he had been convicted for 10 years, what was the charge? The allegation against him was that he called for banning of Jamaat. And the tribunal saw it as a proven charge and punished him with 10 years of life imprisonment. Since when calling for banning of Jamaat is a crimes against humanity? How it is a crimes against humanity? It is the most ridiculous and baffling thing. I still cannot put my head around. That's why actually I'm waiting to read the whole judgment. Maybe something is there which and I'm sure it would be a very, very interesting read. I want to see how the judgment justifies the unjustifiable.
Right. So that brings us to the next issue. I will just add with you that Mr. Inu is such a leader who are actually the author of narratives against Jamaat Islami and the
He was a
right-wing
thought leader.
Islamist
He was a
political
thought leader,
parties.
yes.
Right, he was a thought leader. So from that perspective, questioning his image is the target, and questioning his image means taking control of the narrative by the Jamaat Islamists. That's what I understand. So
You can say that, yes.
right. So going to the question of this judgment, which is, what is your first impression of the judgment we just all saw the televised part of the judgment and order, where for the listeners, I can say that there was 8 charges of crimes against humanity against Hasanul Haque Inu, but only in 3 of them he was punished. As I said in the beginning, he is sentenced to 10 years each, which, since it will run concurrently, there will be one punishment of 10 years. So now, what is your impression about this judgment and order of sentence?
Was I outraged? No, I wasn't. Because I think since the whole farcical case against Mr. Inu started, we know what is going on there, and we are all past that point of being outraged. But yes, we are still baffled. We were still baffled. I was baffled. I'm sure you too were. Because, as you mentioned, there were, out of the 8 charges, he had been acquitted of 5, and he had been convicted or sentenced for 3 charges. And one of the charges, what was the allegation? The allegation was he called for banning of Jamaat. Therefore, he should be punished for crimes. Crimes against humanity.
Right.
Well, banning of Jamaat, calling for banning of Jamaat, it is not a crime. Actually, it is. I would say any responsible statesman of Bangladesh, he should be calling for banning of Jamaat, particularly given their role in the July events that were like very extremely terrorist role, and that is one of the ridiculous charge he has been sentenced for. What was the other charge? That he has allegedly called the police superintendent of Kushtia and instructed him to do certain things during the July. And that is the other ridiculous allegation, because since when he had the power to instruct a sitting police superintendent of police to do certain things? He didn't have the executive authority. He was not a minister. He was not even an MP of Kushtia. He was not even a member of parliament. So how did they came up with that allegation? And the most telling thing is the prosecution failed to present a shred of evidence regarding that instruction to the police superintendent. As you know, the prosecution didn't produce a single bit of evidence regarding that conversation. So what should have been the next best thing? The prosecution, like any prosecution, any responsible prosecution, would have made that superintendent of police and a witness. So was that superintendent of police made a witness to testify that Mr. Inu instructed me? No, he wasn't. He wasn't produced before the court. So this is the kind of charge, and this is the kind of conviction and the sentence, the way it actually worked out for the prosecution. And what was the third charge for which he has been sentenced? He has allegedly spoke to the then Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and conspired to do certain things, to conspired and have become a part of the crimes against humanity somehow. So that was the allegation. And now
That was right.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Over the So the exact charge that is being reported, I will read it to the listeners, is that the tribunal found Inu guilty of conspiracy after concluding that he endorsed the government's decision to impose a curfew and open fire on protesters, conspired with Sheikh Hasina over the phone to implement those measures, and directed party leaders and activists accordingly. So, in my own capacity, when I was analyzing all this digital evidence, I have found that the tribunal has done grave violation in analyzing and putting burden of proof on these digital evidences. For example, we all know that to establish digital evidence, for example, a phone conversation, you must have those two phone sets first. There was no phone sets. Then who retrieved this recording from the digital area?
No
You
mention
need
of
that
that.
witness. No mention of that. Then who actually downloaded it into a hard drive or a pen drive? There is no mention of that. And then it went to a certain analyst. And what is his qualification? He is just a officer of CID, Central Investigation Department. He was a prosecution witness. He just said that he found similarities of voices. What kind of software he used? Who produced those software? When it was purchased? And whether it can be manipulated by human. These
No
things were
mention.
not given the opportunity to the defense to question those things. And this prosecution, this politically biased prosecution, they themselves have one analyst, special prosecutor, who in 2016 was a victim of disappearance, he claims. So, and
So
he
he may
blames
have an agenda
the,
against the.
yeah, right. He has an agenda because he blames Awami League and Awami League's alliance leaders for his alleged disappearance. And how come an informant or a victim who alleges certain crime against a perpetrator, he participates in the same trial? I just don't understand. So
Tapas,
now,
Tapas,
yeah, please.
let's go beyond the technical aspect of the quality of evidence and the digital forensics. But let's look at the content of it. What were the content of discussion allegedly between him and the then Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina? Can you please remind the audience? Like, did it look like a conspiracy?
Absolutely not. It was, as you said, mentioned before, it was just a general conversation like any interested citizen, concerned citizen, just talking with the alliance leader. What is happening in the country? It's just a normal question. It doesn't mean that he is approving something, right? And what is the content? What you have just mentioned in the beginning, that he preferred peace and restraint.
Exactly.
So, and if you are talking about peace and restraint in a conversation with Prime Minister, and then if you are suggesting that what kind of steps you need to take to protect the lives and properties of private individuals or citizens of Bangladesh, that can amount to any crimes against humanity.
That can't.
You have to talk like that, isn't it?
So it looks like that his only fault was talking about restraint, peace during that phone conversation, and that landed him with the charge of a crimes against humanity. I remember that day, Taposh. I'm sure you also remember, like when the recording was actually played in the courtroom. Even the judges and the prosecutor, they seemed very uncomfortable because that conversation didn't at all sound like a conspiracy to commit violence. It's rather the opposite. I would say there is a dissonance between the facts and the judgment. What actually happened and how it had been translated into allegation and then leading to some kind of a verdict and sentence. There is a clear dissonance, clear contradiction between the facts and the outcome of the case. And that is the most interesting part, I would say.
Right. Regarding the nature of the tribunal and the political affiliation of the prosecutors, we have repeatedly said, and which was part of our argument before this tribunal, that it is politically biased, that all of them have political affiliation either with BNP or with Jamaati Islami, and they have their political target to achieve. So what do you think that, I mean, could tribunal get over this biasness through this judgment? What is your thought about it?
the tribunal should have, like, if fair trial or due process, if we have any respect for these principles, then Mr. Inu would have been acquitted for all the charges. The prosecution should have bowed, prosecution should have apologized, and the whole case should have been thrown out of the tribunal. That didn't happen. But probably we should actually remind the audience that in this whole trial, the defense team, Mr. Inu's team, the whole team's hands were actually tied because the defense team was not allowed to actually present information, present evidence that actually contradicted the prosecution's narrative of the July events. Because July event at one point, which started as a peaceful movement, it quickly descended into a violent terrorist incursion. And those were the things the tribunal and the prosecution should have focused on. But unfortunately, those facts were completely kept out of the case. Not only that, the prosecutor, the then chief prosecutor, and who the disgraced prosecutor who later got out of the tribunal, that
because of
prosecutor,
corruption
corruption
allegations.
charges, and it's a disgraced chief prosecutor, Mr. Tajul Islam, he actually threatened the defense team in Mr. Inu of raising the other narrative of what really happened in July. And they have been threatened with, we have been threatened, the lawyers, the families, and even including the accused himself. They were threatened with sedition charges, which carries death penalty. So that was the kind of intimidation under which the defense team and Mr. Inu had to operate in this whole case. Our hands were tied, and that is something everyone should actually take note.
Absolutely, because there was no security to the protection of the lawyers representing Mr. Inu, because they were constantly threatened whenever they wanted a piece of document.
Outside by the mob and inside the
Right.
courtroom by the prosecutor himself.
Absolutely. Not even that, even outside the prosecutors attacked them sometimes verbally.
Exactly.
So
Inciting mob violence against the legal team. So
absolutely.
that is why, because we too are part of the legal team. And fortunately, we are abroad, Taposh, right?
Right.
But many of our colleagues, they actually fought throughout the trial fearlessly, staying in Dhaka day to day, showing up in the court and risking themselves and their families' safety on the line. And that is something I commend greatly. And that is the kind of fearless professionals who actually defended this case on the ground. And so these are the things that happened. And Taposh, you know that we actually complained before the tribunal too, that look, my lord, this is what is happening. Do something, protect the lawyers. And unfortunately, the tribunal didn't take any step whatsoever.
Absolutely. Even you remember that we filed this application for live telecast of the whole proceedings.
Exactly.
But it was denied by the tribunal, isn't it?
Because why did we ask for live telecast? Because we were confident that Mr. Inu is innocent, and we wanted the rest of the country to know that.
Absolutely. And Mr. Inu, he has submitted a written statement, right, before the tribunal, if you remember,
Yes.
and which was read out by the legal team to the tribunal. And that was another reason why I think the tribunal didn't give the permission it to be televised before the nation, so that the narrative of Mr. Inu is not available to the whole nation. So that is what is the situation. So I will come to the last question of the day, which is the prosecution is claiming repeatedly, and the Jamaat Islami, BNP, NCP, everyone is saying that this is crimes against humanity. But on the other hand, Brigadier Shakhawat, what he said about the ammunitions, and then the famous dialogue of Mr. Yunus about this meticulous design, which we have seen being unfolded. And even today, there were videos circulating on X that Fuat and then other young leaders of NCP, they are claiming that how they have targeted and killed police, destroyed public properties and private properties, and which right. Yeah. So do you think that this can be termed as crimes against humanity when there is so much violence taking place? And doesn't police have, or the forces have, the duty to save the citizens of the country and to protect the sovereignty? What is your impression about
in terms of mass violence, in terms of political conflict? It is the duty of any law enforcement authority to save the lives of people, property, and not doing that would be a dereliction of duty. And that was the aspect Mr. Inu's legal team, us, we actually wanted to convey to the tribunal. And unfortunately, though that aspect of the whole scenario, it was completely ignored, overlooked, and it became a trial based on a one-sided narrative, while ignoring completely the other side, others, which could have shed some light and what actually went on and who should be held responsible ultimately. So that didn't happen, and that is where our disappointment comes. Immediately after the verdict that was delivered, Mr. Hasanul Haque Inu, he said a few things from the doc, from the tribunal. I have translated. It may not be a very good translation. Just let me read out parts of it. He said, "Today I have been set free." Obviously, it was a sarcastic comments. Then he said, "Today I am freed from the indignity of having to sit through this cheap spectacle, a one-sided farce masquerading as justice." Then he said, "I was never afraid of the Pakistanis." As we know, he was a very valiant freedom fighter. "But the taunts of today's buffoons make my blood boil." Then Mr. Inu said, "History will record that. For the first time, I was convicted in a fabricated case through a predetermined verdict during General Jia's rule in 1976. And now, under the rule of his son, Tariq Rahman, I have once again been convicted through another predetermined verdict. Yet another orchestrated verdict has been delivered. The court," and then he said about the court, he said, "the court has become a stage for political persecution. The judges have consigned their names to the darkest pages of history by acting as servants of those in power. They have become accomplices in political persecution and have failed to uphold the higher ideals of justice." And then he concluded, "I am a freedom fighter. I came into this world to awaken people. After that comes rest. To struggle is my creed." So such bold statement, Taposh, and this is something that was his verdict about the verdict of the tribunal.
Right. Thank you very much for saying that. So, dear audience, I will say that whether it was crimes against humanity or whether it was a violent act, that is yet to be seen, because the tribunal is not paying a heed to this question. During our written argument, we have mentioned that what happened in 2024, July and August, is not crimes against humanity, but non-international armed conflict, since there were forces that were attacking general people and threatening their life and security and the security of their property. Saying that, both of us are, Dr. Rashid and myself, we are looking forward to the appeal process of this case with keen interest that what is going to happen, because this orchestrated judgment cannot stand under the constitution and the international laws of Bangladesh. Saying that, I'm signing off, and thank you once again, Dr. Rashid.
Thank you, Taposh.